This is an excerpt from our conversation with independent filmmaker Aileen Sheedy. To hear the full episode, click on the link in the description. And now, on with the show.
Once and In the Mood for Love are the two. If you ask most filmmakers, I think, in me and Eileen's age group, those are usually the two. I don't think I know an indie filmmaker who doesn't say In the Mood for Love made me want to make movies.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, is that one of the reasons why it's on your list, Eileen?
Well, it is the most recent one that I've seen. I actually only saw it for the first time maybe eight years ago. So I didn't see it until my partner showed it to me. And we had talked about like Once and like the Before trilogy and all these other movies I loved, and he was like, how have you not seen In the Mood for Love? Like, this is like the perfect movie for you. It's also like it's one of the few movies that I've seen that's like, so I'm half Chinese, and my mom is from Hong Kong. I don't watch a lot of like Chinese movies, but this is like one of the few that I just have really loved. And it feels like there's something about watching particularly people speaking like Cantonese that feels very like home for me, because that's just like, I don't understand it, I don't speak it, but it's like it's a very comforting sound to me.
Does your mom speak it a lot?
She does. She mostly speaks with her sisters, but yeah, there's something about this movie that just feels very like comforting and like of my culture, like even just like because it's also like, it's set in the 60s, and that was the time that she was living there and growing up there, and like hearing her tell me about these tiny apartments that she lived in with, her eight sisters and her grandmother. And like, so the space, like the setting of the apartment is like very, something about that feels very familiar to me. And just like, you go down the stairs and there's like a noodle shop outside and everything's loud and it's like busy. And so, yeah, it's just like, it feels very familiar to me in a way that not a lot of other movies, and particularly familiar with the part of me that is Chinese, that I often don't get to acknowledge or see represented very much.
Yeah, that's fascinating to me, because like that sense of claustrophobia that you get from like, they're constantly shooting, like the screen gets very narrow of what actually has an emotion or people in it. It's often walls and doorways, and then you get those tiny little shots of like her hand on a door jamb or something, the pail that she carries, like those very slow motion, just kind of very tight and very close in shots. And it creates that sense of claustrophobia, and then they make that choice on top of it of not letting you see their spouses very clearly.
Yeah,
like it's always shot around doorways. You hear voices and like you see little bits and pieces and you get senses of them, but never nearly as clearly as the two leads.
Do they actually ever show?
I don't think you ever see them.
Actors portraying them. Well, that was the big artistic choice of this movie, which really impressed me when I realized what was happening, that it was going to be the whole of the movie, was that our two main characters are each married to someone else, and it turns out their spouses are likely cheating with one another. Because they're always out of town, they're never home, or they work opposing schedules, so they don't see one another. And that distance may have been kind of what gave their spouses the opportunity to cheat, or the inspiration to cheat. And in the meantime, we're watching our main characters who are experiencing missing their spouses, meeting one another, commiserating, and realizing an affair might be happening. And then they choose to speculate about how it happened, what happened, and then start doing hypothetical reenactments of their spouses meeting, of their spouses deciding to have an affair. And I mean, we talked about adaptations with all of these different movies. This movie I thought would be a great stage play if it was just two main characters and maybe 3 or 4 additional like supporting cast. But watching them do these little scenelets over and over, and never knowing if they are having an affair themselves, which is also ambiguous in the movie, or if they are continuing to reenact what they think might have happened or might be happening with their proper spouses. And this movie, I mean, we talked about it, also speaks to a different kind of connection, a different kind of perhaps love. I don't know that these two characters are falling in love. What was your impression, Aileen?
What is love? Maybe don't hurt me, but I don't. Yeah, I mean, I do. I think it depends what you mean by that. Like, I do think they are having a very deep connection that is not understood by anybody except for them. Maybe that's love. But it's so fraught with like their baggage because of how this relationship started and where it's coming from. Can they truly like love each other in like a pure and healthy way? No, I don't think so. Like
yeah, it's always going to be the shadows of their spouses are going to be over everything.
Yeah.
I was also sensitive to kind of the time and place the movie was set and how that affected things, noticing like their conversations with one another, their developing friendship or just trauma bonding also had to be handled very delicately with all their neighbors so close by, because they didn't ever want to present the appearance that they were having an affair. And I found that juxtaposition tense and dramatically interesting, that their spouses, as far as we know, are going out, traveling internationally, having what seems like a wonderful affair. And these two characters are having to hide their friendship.
Yeah, and it's so beautiful. I mean, it's just a
Oh my
visually
goodness.
like one of the most stunning movies I've ever seen. The colors and the composition, and like
those are the parts too that get stolen and parodied and all that the most often. I think those slow motion shots of just walking up and down stairs. And
I was just overwhelmed by everyone's dresses.
Yeah. Oh my
It was
God.
dressed so beautifully.
I have a friend who, when we watched this movie together, he's like a kind of like a graphic designer. He was like, I want to make a poster that's just squares of every single one of her dresses. It's just like a pattern from each dress. And I was like, please, he hasn't done it. And I kind of want to take the idea and do it, because I think that would just be like no context, just this, because I think there's like 26 of them or something. There's like an insane amount of dresses that she has.
Well, not just her, but all the women in the movie.
Yeah.
Have
just like perfectly fitted. Yeah, they're gorgeous.
Wonderful textile design. I have a habit that I've started doing, which is I can change the settings on my computer and take the color out. And so watching movies in black and white, and given that this was a period film, I missed a lot of the color when I would make that change. But so much of this movie has a different feel that's not inappropriate or out of context watching it in black and white. Obviously you miss out on the rich color and design, which is gorgeous, but I think you can appreciate it in two ways. By watching it without color, it feels like an old movie from the 60s.
Yeah, it has a lot of texture to it, which I think lends itself to black and white really well.
I wouldn't be shocked if, I mean, I know some really big cinematographers like to sort of drain the color out when they're shooting to sort of be able to see the contrast better. I wouldn't be shocked if Christopher Doyle had done that. But that's part of it too, reading up on how they didn't have a script. And like, I think Christopher Doyle quit halfway through because Wong Kar-wai would be like, we've shot this scene in this location, but it doesn't feel right yet. Let's reshoot the same scene in a different location.
Oh, that would be
so
frustrating.
Yeah, as like a person who works on movies, I'm like, this sounds like a nightmare.
Like a nightmare.
The whole crew probably was like ready to mutiny on this film.
Yeah,
well, that's something you guys can probably talk to, the difference between the enthusiasm of creativity, but when the rubber meets the road, having to make schedules, having to be respectful of people's time, and you can't just do things on impulse. You have to plan and get the crew together to make something happen.
That's one of the
hardest
hardest
parts. You can if you're big enough. People will let you get away with it if you're good. If the quality what comes out on the other side makes it worth it. But
days of heaven shooting where you pay everybody just to stay there all day so that you shoot for an hour when the sun's setting, and then you do it for months at a time. But like most of the time, it is hard to get people to stick around if you're shooting in that sort of way, because it's I mean, it's hard to know if what you're shooting is going to be incredible or if it's going to be a big fucking mess and you're wasting your time, you know. Most of the time it's the second one.
It makes me think of Boyhood, you know,
oh wow, yeah.
They shot that over 12 years, but they only shot for like 3 or 4 days a year, so they would meet and basically just do a short film like every summer. But it was mostly the same crew. And I think he only was able to do that because of his previous success with other movies, and I'm sure he had a crew that he liked and that trusted him, and like I mean, there's directors I've worked for that I would show up and do whatever they wanted me to do if you know, as long as they're paying me. Like I'm like, sure, man, like I trust your ideas, but
there are a lot of people,
you kind of have to prove yourself before you can get to that point.
Yeah, there are a lot of people who are going to do a lot of they have good intentions and they do a lot of big talk and they're trying to make a really good movie, and like the work is being put in, but also you have no idea if when they edit this together it's going to be anything.
It can be hard to see the vision from a crew perspective sometimes, especially if, I mean, some of the artists, filmmaker, auteur types, like they don't communicate super well. And so like they might have a vision. You just have no idea what it is when you're shooting the movie. And so all that you're seeing is like the chaos that's happening.
Yeah. Especially those types. I mean, I feel like Wong Kar-wai is probably pretty similar. They're working from gut instinct. So they're not sitting there and explaining to you what they're doing because they don't know. So